Mr. Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to speak to you this morning here at the European Alzheimer Conference as more or less representative of the University of Luxembourg. And I choose a topic to address you this morning, or let's say in a much larger frame than your private personal experiences. I'm going to invite you to join me within the next 20-25 minutes on a journey to Europe, where I like to highlight some trends in family caregiving by getting together facts on several levels. The chair said it before, I'm a psychologist and a psychogerontologist, no geriatric, no medical doctor, and I'm interested in the individual. But you cannot explain individual behavior and feelings without looking at the context. And when I thought about this presentation this morning, I said maybe I should try to combine different levels, the macro level and the micro level. So what you're going to hear in the next minutes are some facts and predictions about Europe, which you may already heard. I'm sure you heard them before, but I'm not getting tired to talk about them because we have to raise awareness of what is going on in Europe. The next point will be the question, who will care for me? Alzheimer Europe made an excellent study on that as well. I'd like to join some data, some results which are in line with the general findings, and I will contrast the view of the elderly persons and the view of the adult children concerning willingness to support a family member. This will be, so to say, at the micro level, and we will then finish with some summary, desiderata, and conclusions. Now, what's going on in Europe? I'm telling nothing new when I'm telling you that we have a growing life expectancy and lower fertility. But the highlight is on continuing. It continues to grow our life expectancy, which is good in part, and it continues to be low, the fertility rate, meaning this will have a tremendous impact of our society in Europe. There will be changes that had not been before in this European society. Just give a marker, a date, let's say 2030, baby boomers will be very old, will reach the age of 65, and then we will have a problem. Because working population will have significantly difficult work, decrease, and the proportion of active or non-working persons will change. Just to give you an example, in Luxembourg they are actually working, I think, 350,000 persons here in the working market. 150,000 receive a pension. In 2030, 350,000 will receive a pension, and you have to get at least 1.2 million workers to finance this. And in Luxembourg, you will have a problem where to put the people who will work on financing pensions. But there are other changes as well, which are important for family care. Not at the first side, but at the second side. We have social changes. And we have a significant change during the last 30 years in family structures. We have more single parents and more divorces. We have less marriages, more birth outside marriage. We have new family forms and situations, patchwork, my kids, your kids, double income, no kids families. There are several forms of families who have been identified by sociology, and this will all have an impact in the long run on the question who will care for whom and when, because family structures have changed. We have no traditional family anymore. It's still a standard model, but it's not the model, the must. We have, as you all know as well, a pluralism of values. Traditional values of solidarity are not necessarily always agreed upon between different members of our society. I will come back to this later. We have no more standard biographies. This has changed as well during the last years. We have old fathers, meaning you become father up, starting with the age of 40, 45. We have comparatively older mothers. We have no more standard biographies in a way. You go to school, you get your training, you build up a family, and then you work, and then you get your pension. This all has changed and will change in the future. So this is general frame, and I thought when talking about Europe, just go to the Eurobarometer. To see what they say, you may know this standard statistical device. They are on a regular schedule service in Europe, and I picked out 3 questions. The first one is, in all European countries, our government is spending too little on education and young people compared to older people. Now have a guess how many people would agree somewhat or strongly to that. At least, let's say, above 40%, even in rich Luxembourg, 28% agree to this statement. So this is not very dramatic. If you move on and take another indicator, let's say people in employment will increasingly reluctant to pay taxes and social contributions to support elder people. Here you get another picture, and what is raising here, I took Germany, France, Belgium, and Luxembourg just to have the neighbors together. You see there's an increasing agreement on this statement that people in employment will get reluctant to pay. Last item on this, in the coming decades, governments will no longer be able to pay for pensions and care for older persons. What is your idea about that? Eurobarometer says that above in all EU 27, people are convinced that there will be a shortage of resources, there will be a shortage of money, and it will be very, very difficult to finance pensions and care for older people. Now, I don't have to say that this has consequences for all of you, for all of us, but this is only a social science indicator on what is called reality. And what I'd like to highlight when we talk about the micro level, we have to be aware that there's always a link between economic growth and aging workforce, that this will be one of the most interesting topics within the next years, because we have to change our ideas about work throughout life. And we all knew, or came to know, in Europe that economic growth is global growth, and that we are interlinked in our society, in our social systems, with a lot of changes that go on around the world and which have an impact on our life more or less directly. There will be a problem, as said before, with age-related expenditures and the sustainability of public financing. How do we finance health provision and services if the resources are low? What do we insist in education and employment? And who gets what? And this is one question which touches a very important topic, let's say, resource fairness. There are actually, or currently already, discussions about how much do you give to the elderly dependent persons and how much will you give to the young ones. So we have a polarization of the society between the old and the young. I'm just describing it. But this will be a very big challenge for European societies to tackle this. And I will present you some data on intergenerational relations which show up a very quite positive view of this, despite all other interpretations, scenarios in the media, where you sometimes find a saying about the war between generations, even generational warfare. Concerning to social science studies, this is not true, but we have to work on it. So this is another characteristic of a future scenario in Europe. And this is something where we could talk all day, but we won't talk about it. We have social policy models within Europe, and we all are influenced by these kind of models. We have been profiting from a social welfare state based on the solidarity principle. We all. But is this model financeable in the long run? And there are alternatives who are discussed. And I just highlighted 2 points: the social investment society and a neoliberal society. What do we want? The social investment society invests in its members and its citizens, but it expects a reinvestment of everything that society puts into education and training of its members. And within such a society, what will happen to people who don't live up to these standards, who have special needs, who are dependent? Can they live up to these standards? I doubt it. We don't have to discuss a neoliberal ideology behind that, But these are issues that will have to be discussed in the long run in Europe. I'm switching now to something which I like to call the micro-level view. When we talk about who will care for me, we have several perspectives we can analyze. I just like to present you some data on a larger European study which we conducted together with colleagues from Austria, Italy, Luxembourg, that was me, Netherlands, United Kingdom, and Sweden, and we have a very huge sample. That's why these data are so interesting. We talk about 12,478 persons within the age range of 50 to 90 years. All these persons were autonomously living. They had no severe physical or functional handicaps. And we asked them the following question, beside other questions. Is there someone who would take care of you if you were sick and disabled? Now imagine this sample from 50 to 90 years. How many % do you think will respond positively to that? I'm certain you underestimate the number. Because what we've got, and this is why I always keep on presenting these data, we've got a tremendous amount of people saying, yeah, we have someone. We have someone, ranging from 97% of all persons being asked in Austria at the peak and to 87% in Sweden. So elderly between 50 and 90 years are very convinced about finding a person who will care for them if they will be sick or disabled. Now, this is a simple question and you have to differentiate it. What we did here, we asked them how long will this person care for you? For as long as you need it, and these are the green columns which you see here. For a short time, a few weeks to 6 months, and now and then, such as take you to the doctor to fix your lunch. And what we got here is, again, a very, very interesting profile across the age groups, because, again, the majority said, yes, I have someone who will take care for me for as long as I need it. Within this sample, and I think over 12,000 Europeans responding to that, and interestingly, we didn't have any pronounced national differences with the exception of Sweden. The Swedish community is not that convinced, to put it that way, because the social system in Sweden functions in another way as in the other European partner countries who have participated within this study. But I think it's a very interesting result just to see how great or how big the willingness is perceived to get support by people within the family. And if you ask who will support them, you find across all countries this profile. It's always the spouse on the first, and then it's the offspring. And here we find the adult children, goes without saying. These are persons from help networks. We find friends, we find to a lesser degree siblings, and we find as well grandchildren. So this is out of the large sample. When we talk about offspring, we talk of a kind of a prototypical family care, and I guess you know what I'm talking about. She is female. She's in most cases a daughter, or the daughter-in-law, who cares, at the age range between 45 and 65 years. This is what statistics says about these family carers. When it comes to offspring, it's always in most cases, the adult daughters who do the caring in its various aspects. So this is a very, very positive view that one gets when you look at these kind of data. Maybe too positive, we will have a thought on that later. What I'd like to do now is present you results from another study, the view of adult children. And what we did in a study conducted at the university on family relations in adulthood, we interviewed about 1,000 adults, which were no caregivers in the age of 45, with a standard observation of 3 years, meaning quite, well, within middle adulthood. They had 907 mothers who were still alive, 605 fathers, and 494 respondents reported both parents still alive. And it's important to know that we talk here about a sample as well who were no caregivers. but who were asked, would you support your parents in a more general way? But in the first step, and I have to stick to my slides, I'd like to present you something about relationship types. We ask the children about their perceived emotional relationship with mother and father by several psychological tests which we did, and we came up with a classification of family relations out of as perceived by the adult children. And here the picture is somewhat different than the unanimous positive vote within the group of elderly persons. But most of the people, about 40%, judge relationships to father and mother positively. That's about 40%. And then comes one very interesting cluster of groups who is called the ambivalent ones. These are persons who have ambivalent feelings towards one's parent. And I'm asking you now, here, Friday morning, Luxembourg, just reflect on your relations to your parents. Sometimes we have ambivalent feelings to our parents. We love them, but I love my mother, but she always keeps telling me what to do. I love my father, but every time I'm asking or I'm doing something, he knows better. I love my father, but he's getting difficult, and so on. And this is a very, very interesting cluster of groups because it shows the torn between two emotions of adult children. Interestingly, you find this same cluster also in grandchildren, who always have kind of an ambivalent relation to their grandparents. We have another one, I will come back to that. We have another one, a group which we call disharmonious. And this is a group, 10%, 12%, who have a lot of open conflicts with their parents. This was one of the definitive criterion of this cluster, that these persons said we have a lot of quarrel, we fight sometimes, but they are still in contact with their parents. Yeah? And the last cluster is the cluster of detached person. And here we were astonished about the percentage of 24, 25%, which we found in this sample. And this one is a cluster that shows that these were adult children who said, I don't care about my father anymore, or I don't care about my mother anymore. That's why they were classified detached. They reported a lot of negative feelings towards their parents, and almost no positive feeling. So these are 4 groups of relationship: amicable, as maybe expected, ambivalent, disharmonious, and detached. Now what happens if you ask these people, is there a general willingness to support your parents, your father, your mother? And I've just summarized one important finding. We didn't ask them here to care for the elderly parents, but how big is your willingness to support your father or mother when she needs an advice, when she needs some help with daily activities and so on? We constructed a psychometric score on that, and what you find is just it's not astonishing, but the amicable relationships have the highest willingness to support both mother and father. The ambivalent as well, and this is interesting. This is a statistically significant difference to the other clusters. Being ambivalent does not mean that you don't support. You go on with supporting your parents, or you say that you will support them. The disharmonious and detached clearly show the lowest willingness to support mother and father. And now I'd like to show you another moving picture, because we may take these classifications as an idea about how family relations may be regulated in care context. I guess a lot of family relations start as being amicable. And when it comes to caring, or if a person changes, it gets difficult. And sometimes you build up kind of an ambivalent attitude towards your parents or towards the person who you have to care for. What is important now here is to get help, to explain your things, to have ideas what is changing with the person, to get a rational and a solid explanation of behavioral changes. When you are in an ambivalent situation, you may show what is called dysfunctional regulation by the psychologist, meaning you have no support. You try to insist on how it has been before. You do not accept changes that are at hand, and this may result in disharmonious or even detached relations. But this is a process model. When we talk about a family, we always talk about processes. This is not written in stone, because regulating, we all know that we all regulate our relations with mother and father all through our life. But it is especially the situations of caring, I think, where we should have a look at the quality of relationship, which is a clear determinant on the quality of care being given within this context. So it's worthwhile to invest in supporting people in different periods, different stages of the relation that they have with both mother and father. So these were 3 spotlights, I'd like to say. I tried to give you, just to sketch a larger framework in Europe. And I'm coming already to my closing commentaries. What we know is, and this is so trivial, but we don't have to stop to think about this, there is clearly a link between demographic and economic factors and our public resources and social policy. The economy is a subprime mortgage crisis has taught us what happens at the global market and how big the echo will be on the national economies, and this has a direct impact on policy and social policy models as well. And Europe will have, within the next 20, 30 years, ongoing discussions about what the government will have to pay and who will get what from social policy. How do we distribute our resources? This will be one of the crucial questions. At the micro level, findings are, and these are not only the findings from this European study, this general finding of a very positive view of elderly persons concerning support by their children is confirmed in other large-scale European studies. Elderly persons are quite satisfied with their family relations. Perceived support is quite high. And the availability of persons across age groups changes. First it's the spouse in charge and later on the offspring. That's nearly trivial as well. But this is a more general positive view, and when we look at the micro level, if you look at the children's view, we get a somewhat different result pattern showing that relations out of the view of the adult children are not necessarily positive, but maybe ambivalent, maybe disharmonious or even detached. But when we talk about grouping of family relations, I'd like to underline that this is a process. We all know these processes with our own families. There are phases of periods where we may have crises, but we learn from our crisis and we learn new things. We learn to get together to redefine us, so every crisis has a chance, and this will give a more general positive outlook to these results as well. We have to take into closer consideration certainly the feelings of ambivalence. There's a saying or there's a word in social policy as well as in some social science research who says solidarity between the situations is the key. We need solidarity, but you can only promote solidarity when you are aware that there's also ambivalence towards your parents. Relationships are not uniquely positive or negative. Sometimes they have both components. So, last slide, and then I'm leaving you. I hope I'm in time. What we need is, and that is why I'm so happy that Alzheimer Europe is such a big association, and we learned yesterday evening about very, very good projects, and as well about let's call it lobbying, very, very good initiatives on raising awareness for social changes and questions associated to social changes. And this is a clear play also to social policy. We should foster intergenerational solidarity. Solidarity is good, but we have to do something for that. In an aging society, where more and more elderly people face less younger people, we have to think about what we can do about context between generations, communication between generations, and avoid polarized discussion about resource fairness. We cannot pay an operation for grandparents anymore up the age, starting with the age of 80. We had these discussions in some European countries already, and this is difficult, if not to say dangerous. So we have to avoid a polarization of society, and at the individual level, I didn't get too much into the individual level, but we have to be very clear about that, and this is links to all other issues. The caring for a person in old age or any age across the lifespan as a family carer will need support, not only financial support, also informational support. Explain things, what is happening to someone who you love, who doesn't behave like he did or she did. What's happening there? Just give some information. This can be so crucial. Instrumental help, financial, it goes without saying, but also the way it can be realized. Emotional support in backing up carers. And this needs, it's trivial, this needs money. We have to pay for it. We have to get the money for that. We have to have positions. We have to have good trained, well-trained personnel who will work within that context. So I think Alzheimer Europe does an excellent job. I don't say that because I'm standing here and I have to be frontal to you. I'm really convinced about what has been happening during the last 20 years. I think you are on an excellent way of lobbying. And when I look at this data, it's good that Europe has such institutions who go this way. And so with these final compliments to all of you, I'd like to thank you for your attention, for this load of data and load of single results, but I hope you got the general picture. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.